And good evening and welcome to City Focus. I'm Marty Olsen, your host, and it gives me great pleasure to introduce a gentleman who I have admired for a long time, Lonnie Braxton, who's a first timer on the program. And
oh, thank you for having me. You humbled me with those words.
well, you've been an active gentleman in the community and an activist, and I think more often than not, you bring clarity to many of the issues that sometimes seem to get muddled one way or another. And I think that that's a skill that you bring to the table, and you bring people together is well worth sharing here on City Focus. I hope that our viewers get a good chance to hear what we have to say and converse on a number of topics tonight.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I hope that I can add a little insight.
Well, I suspect that you will. One thing that I was not aware of is that you come from the South, that you're from Mississippi.
Yes, I grew up in Mississippi a very, very long time ago and joined the Navy. And for those who don't know my stories, but I got out of the Navy in Norfolk. But as a kid, growing up in Mississippi, I had this dream, I wanted to be a lawyer. And as I've said time and time again, as a kid, every time I picked up something and turned it over and I read made in, it said made in Connecticut, made in New Haven, made in New London, made in Bridgeport. So the one thing that made in told me was there were jobs. So I left Norfolk, I got out of the Navy and came here with the dream. That dream was to be a lawyer. 17 years later, I pulled it off. And for about almost 30 years, I was a lawyer.
Now, what did you do in between arriving in Connecticut and earning your law degree and passing the bar?
Oh God, that's two shows.
Well, let's have the abridged version.
I just retired, and I've talked to some of my friends, and I worked 65 years straight. I started at 8 years old on a milk truck. And most people don't know what a milk truck is,
Well, I do.
Yeah, I can remember, you deliver the milk, and they'll have the note in the bottle, next time bring ice cream or butter or cottage cheese. And that's how I started out. And I worked at a grocery store during high school and a couple of other jobs in a drugstore. And joined the Navy while still in high school, graduated, and came here. And worked at Electric Boat.
So the Navy itself didn't bring you here, as it does many.
As does many. No, I came here like any other immigrant. I'm not an immigrant from, some foreign land, but from Mississippi. And with the hopes and dreams that everyone else had. And I was fortunate enough for those dreams to actually come true. Because a lot of people work hard, very, very hard, in making their dreams come true. And through fate or just something going wrong, it doesn't happen.
Now, when you arrived in Connecticut, had you done any college at that time, or
no,
you were
nothing.
High
school graduate with $156. Worked 2 jobs. Once I bought a small house. The next job was I enrolled myself at Connecticut College, and they had a program at that time called RTC, Return to College, and all older people. So I signed up and started going to school. Yeah. And it was forever. I can remember going 4 nights a week, 7 to 10. And I was working 2 jobs at that time. Crazy. I look back now and I have no idea how I did it, or was I just out of my mind.
Well, I went through the RTC program at Con, so I understand what you did.
Yeah. It was interesting because you would sign up for a class. They need, I think, 5 or 6 people in order for the class to actually continue. And you go to the class 2 or 3 times, all of a sudden the class disbanded because not enough people. Now you're searching and struggling to find another class, trying to figure out your schedule, see, will I have enough credits to graduate in this amount of time?
Yeah, it was interesting.
Oh, yeah.
But
I loved it.
Yeah, I had done Northeastern out of high school for a couple of years and withdrew. And took a 16-year sabbatical. So it took you 17 years to get through. Well, I took a long sabbatical and then enrolled in Mitchell. And from Mitchell gave me confidence I could go back to school. And then did Con.
I took 4 years off. I owned a store in Laconia, New Hampshire. But from the time I started So the time I got my law degree, it was 17 years. And that was a long time. You know, I look back now, you have to want something pretty bad to stay at it that long.
Yeah.
But I attribute that kind of tenacity to my parents.
Now, when you concluded your law studies, did you took the bar exam?
Oh, I took the bar exam. That's a different story. I was taking the bar exam like it was my second profession. You know, the first time I took it, I came home and you need 264 points. And I got, I think, 262. One question I would have done. And I came home the second time from taking it. I found out my mother had passed. And through a series of events, I found out at 40 years of age, I'm dyslexic and ADD. And, you know, when you look at something like that and you go, why didn't someone tell you? And I have an experience I can remember from, I think it was ninth grade in high school. And I'm at the board writing. And I was writing the letters, a couple of them backwards. And the kids are teasing me and yelling. So I'm erasing them and writing them back, but they're still backwards. And if the teacher had been properly, had been trained and not been in the South Hospital or through a series of other things, it would have probably been detected then. But, you find workarounds and you find out how to survive. And I did. And I was lucky enough to find out about being ADD and dyslexic through one of my friends from law school whose mother had worked for a doctor at Tufts New England Medical who he had talked to his mother, and I knew her, and they kept talking about how I could figure things out all the time, what have you. And I went and did this battery of tests, and he says, you've been surviving, but this is the issue. And it's not something you can fix, but it is something you can work through. And I was fortunate enough to work through it.
Well, you're tenacious.
Well, thank you.
Yep. To do some of the things that we do, I think tenacity is a good trait.
Oh, yeah. Anyone can really be smart, but you have to be willing to stick with something, and that's, again, I attribute to my parents and the nuns.
Now, did you go, after completing your academics with law, did you go right into it, or was it
I hadn't passed the bar, so as it turned out, I spent about 4 years working at the University of Connecticut School of Law. I was Director of Information Technology for the law school. And the last big thing I did there was a law library. I was responsible for actually computerizing the campus, tying all of the buildings together with a network. It was quite a feat. I had a great time. But I wanted to be a lawyer in practice. And originally I wanted to be an international lawyer and work in China. That was my dream in 69, 70. But as I worked my way through, I found out that, my parents were not diplomats. We didn't have the kind of connections that would allow you to be in a place like Yale with all the connections so you could go into the diplomatic corps. And through a series of events, I spent some time interning at GA10 in New London with J. Benson Hauser and Mike Regan and John Pannone and a number of other names that people may know. And they took me in, and I loved it. And
GA10's on Broad Street.
Yes, in New London.
Yep.
Geographical 10. Great court, and had great judges like Judge Tamboro, Judge McMahon. These were men who were not only judges, they were very practical, and they truly understood and took account of the human condition.
Yeah. Well, Mike Regan, I mentioned to you in preparation for the program. I mean, I've known him since we were children. We grew up together and graduated high school together.
Yeah, he retired several years ago.
Yeah.
He lives in New London. He's a good guy. Really
He still
good
does. Man. And you mentioned John Pannone. He was a New London police officer prior to going into law.
Yeah. He another great person.
So what type of law were you practicing, though, when you first got out into the field? I mean, you didn't go directly into the public sector, or did you?
I didn't spend much time in the civil world. I worked with Basilica for a while, but a person who shouldn't go unmentioned, who understood that my dream, as far as the law was concerned, was Tom McGarry. And Tom McGarry tried to make sure that my dream was going to come to fruition. And he allowed me to figure out what lawyers did, to see how the process really worked, which was great. And a couple of other people was, at the time, Attorney Martin, who became Judge Martin. And
City Councilor Martin.
Yes.
Mayor Martin.
Mayor Martin. He was quite a man, and he was practicing with Dominic Piacenza. And another person who's kind of unsung too would be Mel Scott. You know, he came from Colchester. He was a mentor to an awful lot of lawyers. A very gracious man, very, very intelligent guy, but very practical and down to earth.
Well, you've mentioned a lot of well-known names in the local community and beyond. I mean,
you know, the thing is that, you know, as we sit here, we all like to think that we've done everything on our own. You know, we pulled ourselves up our bootstraps and that, you know, we have all this tenacious drive and we're so strong. No one gets really anywhere without the assistance of someone else, whether or not we acknowledge it.
Well, I think that you're correct, but no matter how much others are there, you still have to have perseverance to make it happen.
Yes, that's
true. They can
true.
only pull you so far.
Yeah. But I never cast aside or failed to understand the importance and the value of another person's hand.
Well, that's very, very important. I know that you and I share a mutual friend in town, Jim Hamill.
Oh yeah, good man.
For me, it's interesting because you had mentioned before we went on the air that you're not a sports guy.
No.
And I am, and so is Jim, and that's where we have connected through sports and then politics. But what was your connection to Jim? Or was it electric boat?
Jim Hamill and I have lived for over 50 years, usually not more than a block and a half from each other. And we have been friends, all of that. I have a photo of me holding one of Hamill's children and my kid like this. And those photos are over 50 years old. And I think that he and I have probably spoken every day for probably 30 years. We always talk. You know, we call each other or see each other in some fashion to check on each other. Well, and now as we've gotten older, it really is important. You know, I'm here without the benefit of aunts, uncles, brothers, sisters, or what have you. My family was very small, and they're basically all gone. And it's nice to have someone who may not be your blood brother, but is as close.
Well, that's fabulous that it sustained for such a period. I mean, you know, most will say if you can count your good friends on one hand, or more than likely less, you're fortunate, and you're very fortunate.
Oh, thank you.
And you mentioned your son. I don't know how many children you have, but I know one son you have is an adult now. But I mean, he's quite an athlete. It's a tennis player, and I'm trying to figure out where he got that from.
Well, you know, when your father's a 14-letter man, how can you miss? No, I have no interest in sports. I have no idea where that came about, but he has won the Nationals twice in Special Olympics. He was profiled on ESPN. He's done exceptional. He loves sports. And Down syndrome, development disabled, but it hasn't stopped him. And I have learned more from this guy than I have ever taught him. He's my best friend, my confidant, and he reads me like a cheap novel with large print. And he has a great life, and as a result, my life has been more than enriched. And the kind of things that he has done for my life in ways that people would never have any idea. I can never thank him enough, no matter what I do. You know, I have a very, very good friend, and this person and I were friends for a long time, and we had both gone through some kind of crazy relationships and stuff. And he loved sports, and so she got into law school, and he would want to go to games all the time. And since I'm working at the law school, some of the professors had tickets that they didn't use for basketball games. I can't handle sitting through those games. So often she would come by to borrow a horn book or what have you, because Hartford is 50 miles away.
Yep.
So I would buy all of the black letter law books, horn books, and what have you, and study at home rather than make the trip back and forth, because I had to work when I left law school. I didn't have the benefit of just coming home studying. And through a course of events, my son comes to me one day and he says, I'm going to call her mom. And her name is Gwendolyn. And I said, really? What did she say? He said, she says it's okay. I said, well, I'm not asking. She said, sure. So they developed a really, really deep relationship, and as a result, she and I did. So he made better choices than his dad. And as a result, I'm happy today.
Good for you. That's fantastic. That's fabulous.
Yeah. So, but I I think at this age and this stage of my life, I am living the best life possible. I've worked a long time, and if you had asked me 10, 20 years ago, where would I be? I thought I would have been somewhere else, but I find out I'm in the best of place. Well, and I mean the best of place where I live, like New London, unbelievable place. How can you beat it? It's on the move. I was, thinking about it, before coming here, because I had met with some people today, and here's the town that Marty Renshaw, what was his saying? Town too tough to die. And now, instead of being on life support or being the disinterested stepchild, New London is coming into its own. If you were to come here on a Thursday night and you got a hotel room, you woke up Friday morning, you could have brunch at, say, like Muddy Waters or something. You could spend the day on the Black Heritage Trail, 15 sites where you can look and view and experience 350 years plus of African American history. You could then go to like the Lyman Allen Art Museum. How many towns this size have a museum of that quality with, if it's Chinese, it's there. If it's Egyptology, it's there. If it's indigenous people, it's there. If it's the great masters, it's there. And it's in New London. And, you could spend all of your whole day just doing that. Grab lunch or dinner, finish off the day, grab dinner that night, get up the next morning. What do you have? Fort Trumbull. You could take the Heritage Water Taxi, visit the sites, Monte Cristo, and don't leave out the Guard. At the end of the night, you could go, and on a weekend, on a Saturday, there's always something going on. How many cities have something like this going on? And when I came here, there were a lot of jobs. And we went through a period when not only in New London or Connecticut, but basically nationwide, things had fallen off. And it appears now that we have some people who have worked really, really hard to, 10 years worth of contracts Electric Boat will have. We look at people like Courtney and Blumenthal and others who've worked hard to get these contracts here. Now they're jobs. And it's not only New London that's profiting from this. We look at our sister cities, the towns around. In New London, we call it a city because 350 years ago, it was called a city. And we had boroughs and towns and villages and hamlets around us.
Yeah. It's interesting because, New London, for its size, really is not a city. It's in terms of population or area, for that matter. Although, ironically, as you've outlined, I think it's still the hub of Southeastern Connecticut.
It is the smallest municipality in the state, but it has the density of Seattle, Washington. I'm a geek, so I'm always checking facts.
As with all the books you brought in, and that's only just a few. You've got some behind you here.
My wife has this saying that if I drop dead, Amazon's going out of business. And it will happen quickly. No, I brought a couple of things because I'm one of those persons who has a strong belief that knowledge is power. And one should spend every day empowering oneself. And we look at the way that things are today, a lot of people no longer want to be empowered. And we have to bring that back. You know, a week or so ago was going through one of the bookshelves in my house, and I came across a 6th grade booklet. And that booklet was a civics book. It was about 50 pages. And you had to learn all the different branches of government, everything in circle. And if people had been studying civics for the last 20 years, 25 years, a lot of things that are going on today wouldn't be happening. Because we wouldn't be going by what we think or what someone says, we would be going by what we know. And
it's funny, I mean, I don't think that today that enough attention is paid to civics in general, and certainly not local civics. I don't think our kids are getting a good look or view or understanding of where they are, their own community.
Well, you know, I'm fortunate that I'm with someone who allows me to volunteer and participate. You know, my parents had a statement before I heard it from Muhammad Ali. And the statement's basis about volunteering and doing things to your community is the rent you pay for being here on earth. And we were taught that you just don't sit by.
You know, you have to give back. Giving back is critical.
Yeah, you have an obligation to your community and to your fellow man. And that obligation can be shown in many ways. So I always try to understand the human condition, and I always try and learn something about everybody and everything. And what happens is, the more you know you don't know. And you may also find out very quickly how we're all the same in some fashion. And if we find out that there's a lot that connects us, we don't have to be so quick to judge and so quick to condemn.
Touche. Very well stated.
Well, old guy.
I think that this I think goes to my opening in terms of how my observation from an arm's length away of what I see when I see Lonnie Braxton.
Well, what you see when you see me, you see Lonnie and Lenora, my parents. You know, I'm a strong believer that when a child is born, it's like a clean sheet of paper. There's nothing written on it. And the people in that child's surroundings, the parents and what have you, are the people who write on that sheet. And we should be careful of what we write. Because often when we have to go back and read it, or it's read back to us, we are not happy with what we see or hear.
Yeah. Well, you know, some of the, and I know you've got a keen interest in our community in New London, as well as, and you just alluded to it, the African American experience in New London and the trail that has been recently established in a more formal sense. The sites where I've been there forever. Now it's just a matter of just tying them.
Yeah, well, some of those people you know. Spencer Lancaster.
Absolutely. Well,
Linwood Bland.
Well, Linwood Bland. When I first got involved in politics, he was a gentleman who I was advised to seek out, and I did. And
but
he was, he was about as straight a shooter as you can get.
Well, I'll tell you, the thing that's been so interesting.
Read his book as well. I own his book, I should say, and have read it.
Oh yeah, Curtis Goodwin was instrumental in making the trail happen. But there were people like Tom Shook, New London Landmarks, the rector. I don't want to, because I'll forget someone's name, but there are all these people who just jumped on board, did all this research, and there was so much we all learned. Like downtown, where Roberts Electronics was, there's a plaque in that area, and it is for the Bristol Hotel. And the Bristol Hotel was a hotel that black people stayed at in Connecticut. And through a series of events that were proven not to be true, that these some sailors of color had attacked a couple of white sailors, it was proven untrue, but the rumor spread anyway. And over 5,000 people surrounded this hotel. This was in 1919, and trapped all the black people inside. They had to call out the shore patrol, the Marines, the full fire department, full police department, everything to quell the riot downtown New London. There was a guy by the name of Ichabod Pease who was in his 80s, in the late 1700s, who started a school for black kids. After petitioning the city council, he received a sum of about $50 to make the school work. There was a black lending institution on Green Street. There was the Sant House, which has a curve, looks like a ship that people pass on Bank Street. And the reason for the curve, because there was a stream that ran by, and they don't want the back of the house, being washed away. So there are all these little things in New London that you can enjoy. The Custom House with the Amistad Pier. It's just, there's so much.
Well, that was its first port of call.
Yes, it was.
I mean, Spielberg left that out of his movie,
Yes. Yeah.
which is too bad. But,
Well, New London's been left out of a lot of things, but it's our job to put it back in. Just because it was left out did not mean it didn't happen.
that's a fact. That's a fact. And McCoy Pope, who recently passed away,
Yes.
he was a student of the Amistad.
Yes, I knew him. He was a good man.
Yeah.
And there are going to be additions to the Heritage Trail. In fact, this summer, the Lyman Allen Art Museum is going to have a real large program concerning Barclay Hendricks, who came here and taught at Connecticut College from Philly, and he is now a world-renowned artist. He passed a number of years ago, but he was based in London guy. He loved this city, and he did an awful lot. Most of his work was done here, and he's the first person of color to be at the Frick. So these things should not be forgotten, and they should be celebrated. And the museum is going to be celebrating him, and we hope that with the next dedication of plaques in New London, that the city celebrates him.
Well, it'll require, someone such as yourself and others to ensure that occurs.
Yes, it's going to occur.
Yeah, I grew up in New London, as did my father, my uncle. My uncle was a local physician. My father ran a home improvement business that his father had started back in the 1930s. So, my ties are to this community. And growing up in the 60s and early 70s, there was a fair amount of turmoil, not just nationally, but locally as well. You mentioned Linwood Bland. We had Milton Cook. The NAACP was playing a significant role in trying to break down barriers at that time.
And there were a lot of barriers, that were up. You must have read about the Italian anarchists in New London and what was going on there. There are several stories about that. So New London has had a number of different groups that have been involved in things. That's what makes the city great. And the thing that is also interesting, Robert Moses, with the inception of building the highways, the way that the highway was run through New London, cut it up into pieces. When I came to town, you could drive across 95 over by Bradley's, where the Golden Cup was and what have you. If you look at those streets, they actually connect to the other side of 95. But it was only 2 lanes going by when I first came to town.
Yeah, well, a lot of folks will look at urban renewal as a major negative, and I would agree to a significant part, but the construction of the second Gold Star Bridge probably did more damage to New London than urban renewal in terms of
right. But that was taking place nationwide. If you go into New York, Little Italy was cut apart the same way, through a highway.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned Robert Moses. I've read a book on him. It's got about 1,000 pages there.
Oh, yes.
Power broker.
Yes, he was a power broker, the most powerful unelected person in the country.
Yeah. New York City as well as New York State.
New York nationwide, because what he was preaching and the elixir he was selling was used nationwide. You know, you go to Hartford, how does that road run around? That was part of his legacy.
Yeah, well, it did a lot. Highways did a lot of damage in a lot of cities.
Oh yes. Yeah. And some
Neighborhoods
places
were broken up. Local economies
destroyed. Businesses that have been there for eons, gone. You know, like New Orleans, you know, in the neighborhoods, the bridge was raised above the stores. So eventually just, you know, you couldn't take it, you know, things falling and the dust, the noise, the destruction and the access, and bingo. Within 10 years, over.
So
You know,
I mean, it's been unfortunate, and the thing is that as we sit here today, you know, we can lament about what transpired, but that doesn't solve the problems moving forward.
No. And if you sit lamenting, you'll never move forward. And that's what's so great about New London right now. It's moving forward. You know, no matter what happens, we can look around, a number of things that are being built, the people who are coming here. My neighbors from New Jersey, there are other people on the street from New York. And this was not what happened in the past, you know.
Now, you know, the mayor is, from my perspective, is gambling heavily with all the apartment buildings. I mean, we've got extensive, large-scale, high-end apartment buildings. These are, for those who are clamoring for affordable housing, this is not affordable housing that's being built. What is your take on all this?
That would take 2 days.
Well, we've got another 25 minutes or so.
Okay.
And we can have you back.
There's a book I'm reading right now. There are two books that, if you would like to get a take on it, one's called Evicted, and one's called Poverty by America. Right now in America, there are companies that own 30, 40, 50,000 pieces of property. One I'm familiar with that owns over 130,000 pieces of property. A lot of these are single-family homes. A lot of these are starter homes that a guy, they get married, they save a little money for 4 or 5 years, they buy a house and they start. Those houses are no longer available. So what's happened is venture capitalists go in, they will pay top dollar for this house and just jack up the rent. The guy next door who owns a house that he's renting out, he sees this guy is getting $2,000 for rent, and he was only getting $12,000. What do you think he's going to do?
Raise his rent.
Raise his rent. Which means now that couple who was going to one day be able to buy a house because they're paying so much for rent will never be able to purchase a home. So I would love to tell you I have the silver bullet or the grandiose idea as to how it can be solved, because we like to think that business should not be bothered. But there's capitalism and there's greed. And what's happening is it's no longer a mom and pop operation. This is big business. And they want all the benefits and none of the risk. So maybe we should up their risk so some other people could have some benefits.
And what's your suggestion for that?
Oh. You know, I'm a capitalist at heart, but there's a difference between the capitalism and the greed. I think that if you're going to possibly, and this is only throwing something out because I haven't had a chance to really analyze it, if you're going to own all of this property, maybe you shouldn't have the kind of tax break that the guy and his wife are going to get. Because when you get that tax break, you're never going to allow anyone else to build wealth. And one of the ways that this country really grew after World War II was because people were able to build wealth. When you were able, you know, we talk about free college, we had it. And we talk about free housing, kind of, we had it. Because if you were a GI, you could buy a house anywhere from $7,000 to $11,000, $12,000 that was guaranteed by the government, the loan, that you were paying less for a mortgage than you were paying for rent. So in the 60s, you were able to take money out of that house and send your kid to college. A lot of people couldn't do that. Black GIs couldn't do it. So there was a difference when it came time. What was your worth going to be 30 years later? Well, now with the venture capitalists coming in, buying up all this, everyone's in that boat. How are people going to build wealth for the next generation?
Well, real estate has been ownership of land has been a pivotal and critical way to build wealth almost from the get-go of this country.
Yes, but
I mean that's when they had the go west, young man, go west, and
yeah, but when you
get however many acres it was, and,
right. But when you were going to go west at that time, you were also going to be given that land. If you were given it, you tilled it, you took care of it, you had it for a certain amount of time, it was your land. They built land grant colleges and what have you to actually help you to learn how to farm and take care of this land. So now you don't have so many 400 or 500 acre farms or 1,000 acre farms. You've got some 5,000 and 10,000 acre farms that are ran by who? A conglomerate, a corporation.
Right. Yeah, the small farmer is it's a myth.
As we are talking, the one thing that's popping to mind is that everything is turning to a monopoly. And there was a time in this country not too far back in the distant past that monopolies were attacked. Because monopolies, I do not believe, are put together for the benefit of the nation, but for the benefit of a few.
Well, the History Channel has had a series, The Men Who Built America, going back to Vanderbilt and J.P. Morgan, Ford, Carnegie, the Industrial Revolution of the late 19th and early 20th century, which fits the mold what you're saying. I mean, they were, but the growth of the country couldn't have happened without it. But this, as you point out, the flip side of the coin, it was not all.
But you also remember the trust busters too. And why did they bust? Why did the trust busters come into being? And as those men got older, the first thing they did was to divest themselves of their wealth. They started building the libraries and the schools and doing great things.
Well, Rockefeller.
Yeah, there were several others.
Oh, absolutely.
But I don't see that happening this time. When Ronald Reagan became president, 1% of the American population had 9% of the wealth. When George Bush Jr. left the presidency, 1% of the American population had 24.8 or 9% of the wealth. If I constantly increase the size of my pie, something happens to everyone else's pie. And I don't see how people are working any less or not working as hard as people have in the past. They're just not getting as much benefit for it.
Well, the economics have changed. How things, we used to make things here. Mm-hmm. And we're not making as much stuff, at least not with humans. I mean, we're still producing, but there's an awful lot of robotics that is doing the making the production.
But even so,
becoming a service economy, which
and it's a different economy. But still, if you, whether or not we're making it, someone is working. And I think back to when I came here, there was what I call the 25% rule. You know what the 25% rule was? 25% of your pay paid your housing.
Yeah.
Now, as a prosecutor, I had a chance to see an awful lot of financials. And what I saw, a lot of people would come and they would pull into the parking lot at the court. And I would go out for lunch sometime, and they got 3 or 4 smocks hanging in. One from Walmart, one from the casino, one from Wendy's. They're working all of these jobs. And when they work all of those jobs, one of those checks may pay their rent from all of those jobs. Not, the Wendy's pays this, no, they need those 3 checks to pay rent. And so the wife, or whatever, she works another one to try and feed them and have transportation. You know, and we all pay for that in the end. We pay for it in bad health. We pay for it in the mental health area. So it's in, like I said, I'm a capitalist. I don't think there should be a free ride for anybody. But the free ride for nobody should also include those who want to have everything because they can afford lobbyists. You know, and I don't see a person paying millions of dollars to a lobbyist just for the fun. He could take that money and put a wing on a hospital.
Yeah. Well, the thing is that you have, knowledge is power, and you alluded to that kind of at the top of the program. And you've worked hard to secure an education for your benefit of practicing the law. Are folks taking full advantage in today's day and age of the education being afforded to them?
See, I would love to tell you that I worked so hard that the guy standing next to me didn't work as hard, but it's not true. I worked really, really hard and was blessed because I didn't have something really bad befall me. There are people who I've watched work very hard. Someone died in their family. Someone got sick all over. One rock in the road can trip you up enough that no matter how hard you've worked, it won't come to fruition. And when I look at myself and I see myself in the mirror, I know how blessed, how fortunate, how lucky, how everything I have been. And that my fellow man may not have been as lucky. And I'm not trying to say, well, I didn't do anything. No, I'm saying in the process of doing it, I was fortunate.
Well, I think that there's an element of fortune, even for the folks who, and people don't start off, life's not fair. I mean, we're not all starting off at the same place.
Oh, no, I can't say that. Oh, no.
There are those who are starting off here, whether it's due to financial, their families,
or family standing or what have you. I saw that in school. Oh, God, First semester of law school, you're in there and people are using these words. I'm thinking, do they take a special course during the summer? No, because when they grew up in the household they grew up in, these words were used because mom and dad were lawyers. So, you had to work that much harder to learn these things to catch up.
That's it.
I was lucky enough to learn them enough to catch up.
Yeah. But, it can be argued that one of the best, if not the best, government programs was post-World War II with the GI Bill, because it encouraged a whole generation of folks coming back from the war.
It empowered.
It gave them an opportunity
right.
to go to school.
Well, and it was free. And without that program, we never would have gone to the moon. We wouldn't have. There are so many things that we would not have today. The middle class would look nothing like it looks now.
That's correct.
And for every dollar we invested in that program, I think we got 11 or 19, some crazy number back. What bank gives you that kind of return on your money? What stock gives you that kind of guarantee on your money? And we shouldn't forget that, because what's happening right now, America is in a quagmire.
Well, you're kind.
We don't have, and this is, I have to check this, but we, I believe, do not have enough births right now to replace ourselves. There are probably maybe 200 countries in the world. And I would venture to say probably 125 to 150 have a birth rate right now that is below the sustainability. I love listening to foreign broadcasts like the BBC, Radio Nippon, and Radio Deutsche Welle, so I can hear what's going on in the world and get a different view. And China recently lifted the one-child policy. You go, they got 1.5 billion people. What are because they've got this large chunk of people, say between 55 and say 80. And 25 years ago, I think there were 12 people working for every person who was retired. And now it's down to 2. So if this large group of people dies off, there isn't going to be anyone there to do anything. And so here we are in a position right now where we say no one wants to work. Well, we haven't taught really young people giving them the opportunity to work. That's why I won't go, when I go into a Stop and Shop, one of these places, I won't use the self-checkout. Because if a 16-year-old that never learns to work until he's 25 years old, would you want to work? So when we have people we say don't want to work like that, but we also don't have the people there. There aren't enough people alive in the country to do it. And I think something's going to happen whereby countries will be fighting for immigrants and making all kinds of promises because they're going to need people to actually fill the ranks of the people who are not there.
Yeah, well, and it's an interesting dynamic here in the States itself, as well as globally, in terms of and when you throw in immigration as well. I mean, if you've got countries that have been rather monolithic indigenous populations, and then you bring in a whole new crew of folks that A, may not look like them, or
right.
B, have different cultures, and,
right.
and
well, I hear
and you get
yeah,
some
it's
of
going to
this.
be but that's one bit of distress. But I think what's going to happen is all of a sudden countries are going to start to figure out they don't have anyone. You know, I worked until I was 73 years old, way past my expiration date. The only reason I stopped was my family. We were having dinner one night because I was going to work to 75 or better, and they made me an offer I couldn't refuse. They said if I kept working, then I would be having dinner alone because they would be gone. So I got the hint and I stopped. But when COVID came, people my age, so many people who could retire just walked away. Who was trained to take their job? What is the average age of a tool and die maker in America?
I suspect old.
Yes, very old, over 65. So we have jobs, and we say no one wants to work. In the same breath we say no one wants to work, we should also say who is trained to take that job. You know, Electric Boat at one time had an unbelievable apprenticeship program. The Carpenters Union had an unbelievable apprenticeship program. And for years, those things kind of fell by the wayside. You know, this is like baseball. You know, as long as you had a lot of fans coming to the stands, they were always full. But instead of cultivating a new generation of fans, we let that group of fans start to die off. So one day you come to the stands and a lot of vacant seats. And now we have a lot of vacant seats.
Well, we have challenges ahead for sure. And I think here in the States, if I'm understanding and reading things, at least interpreting things properly, the white population is where you're seeing the largest retraction of the population. You're not seeing that level of growth that you may see with other populations.
I disagree.
You disagree?
I disagree. I think the facts will hold out. You know, how many families you see now with 6 kids?
Rare.
How many you see with 4?
And I'll put it this way: rare and rarer too with families that are educated. Mm-hmm. If you're coming from a family that's
a lot of people don't have any.
That's correct.
And what happens is, if we go back pre-1990, around say 88, 85, there was this talk about the welfare mom with the 8 kids. You don't hear that anymore because nobody is having any kids. And in the process of not having any kids, you do that for a generation and a half, there's no one there. And that's where we're at for everybody.
I mean, I know Japan has got a major problem in this
Italy,
area.
Japan.
They can't sustain themselves.
They can't sustain themselves. And when Canada is, if you come in with a certain amount of money, certain what have you, they don't care who you are, you come on in because they know. They know. And that's why we have to be careful of what we say. Because over time, we will have discouraged so many people that when we need something, it's not going to be there.
Well, it's interesting challenges and discussions.
Oh, yes.
And I'm looking forward to continuing this discussion with
thank you.
on City Focus on a future program, because
thank
I
you.
think we have opportunities to explore many different
Well, like I
topics.
said, I like history. I love reading, and you know, this city and this country is like the Titanic. We're all in this boat together, whether you're in first class, steerage, or second or third class. If the boat starts to sink, we all go down. So we don't have to all row together, but we should all certainly bail together to keep it afloat.
That's true. So that's one of the things that concerns me with the housing in New London that I alluded to earlier, is that this is geared for younger folks, singles, or young married couples, or empty nesters. But there's certainly, and none of these buildings have any amenities for families or children. And I worry about this being a transient population that's not going to have those roots that we need to sustain our own community, with giving back that we need.
I
the
think
coaches and the scout leaders, etc.
I think that for probably 10 years, there are going to be a lot of people here. They're not going anywhere. And I have seen in my own neighborhood people move from other places who expect to stay here. And they came from New York and, as I said, New Jersey and what have you. And they are buying single-family homes, and they're sinking deep roots.
Yeah. Well, they're sending their kids to our schools.
Some don't have kids, which I find interesting.
Well, that's an interesting dynamic. Interesting dynamic. Well, it appears our time is running out.
Well, thank you for the opportunity.
And I have absolutely been delighted to have you join me for this.
And talking about
this
New
hour.
London, I received something today. New London, dare to believe. And I just received this email, and there is going to be an economic development forum on achievements, opportunities, and challenges. And it is going to be at the Guard Theater, and it is going to be on May 22nd. And I think we should all be there so we can have this discussion in person with people who need to hear us.
Sounds good to me.
Thank you. Take care.
Lonnie, thank you so much.
Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Folks, you've been watching City Focus. Been delighted to have been joined by Lonnie Braxton. Next week, my scheduled guest is Tammy Millsaps, the head basketball coach of the New High School Girls State Championship team. So we'll see you next week on City Focus. Good night.